Hello, my name is Amanda and my partner is Natalie. For our Person in Public Health project, we have decided to research Dr. Mary Claire King.
In our presentation, we will be going in depth about Mary Claire King's biography and ultimately all the amazing contributions and finding King has done. King was born on February 27, 1946 in the suburbs of Evanston, Chicago. Her dad had Parkinson's syndrome and stayed at home with King's little brother Paul. While watching the Cubs game, King and her dad were very fond of math problems that related to the game. This is where her interest in math came in. King graduated in 1966 at the age of 20 with a BA in mathematics at Carleton College and Northfield, Minnesota. After her undergrad, King started to study statistics at UC Berkeley. King took a genetics class and was in love with the combination of math and science that involved genetic mutations, which led her to change her entire course of career.
As a teenager, King watched her best friend die from a kidney tumor. In 2004, King stated, "I always hated cancer. It was a bad thing, and I wanted to fix it." King attributes her motivation and interest in science and cancer research to that experience. King looked up to her two math teachers in high school. Stated, "They were my first role models for any woman in science." While getting her PhD, it was during the 60s. This was when the counterculture movement, or also known as the hippie movement, happened. This was due to the people opposing against the Vietnam War. King was involved in social justice causes, for example, civil rights movement and anti-war movement. The US invaded Cambodia during the Vietnam War in 1970s, and King orchestrated a protest and temporarily dropped out of college when the National Guard removed the demonstrating students. During her time out in school, King started working with Ralph Nader, a political activist, on the California Project, which is researching the effects of pesticides on farmers. When King returned back to school, she started to work on a project with Alan Wilson, who was her mentor and convinced her not to drop out of graduate school. Wilson gave advice to King and said that if everybody's whose experiments failed stopped doing science, there would be no one left. Her project with Wilson is one of her contributions to public health. Her project analyzed the molecular similarities between humans and chimpanzees with an emphasis on protein coding genes. King reported that 99% of amino acid sequences in humans and chimpanzees are identical. This research shaped scientific perspectives on human evolution and diversity. This relates to public health because King's research helped with genetic diseases.
In 1983, King used her skills as genetic to contribute to human rights. King worked with the Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, a human rights group that aimed to reunite kidnapped children during the 8-year Dirty War in Argentina. King developed the first PCR sequencing assay using mitochondrial DNA. King also used dental samples to find mitochondrial DNA and blood type makers to match the child to the parent. She reunited over 100 families. This expanded the role in genetic science and public health.
Now, here's King's biggest contributions to public health. Prior to her own research lab, King believed that familial links were due to inherited genetic mutations. King knew that there was a breast cancer gene, so she was set on finding it. This is significant to public health because although at present cancer is considered a genetic disease, but in the early 1970s, cancer research mainly focused on viruses. In 1976, King applied for assistant professorship at School of Public Health at UC Berkeley to run her own research lab. King got hired, but only because universities were making attempts to hire more women. But there was still resistance from those who weren't used to seeing women in leadership roles. King's research started and her group mapped the breast cancer gene using linkage disequilibrium analysis, which involves isolating polymorphism in DNA sequences that are shared among individuals with the same phenotype. It took 17 years, but in 1990, King identified the breast cancer gene BRCA1 on chromosome 17 and later on BRCA2 on chromosome 13. King found that half of women that have inherited these gene mutations have no family history of breast or ovarian cancer. BRCA1 and BRCA2 revolutionized breast cancer prevention and treatment. Those proteins are tumor suppressor proteins, meaning they repair damaged DNA in the cell and prevent cancer. King found that individuals with the inherited gene mutation had 81% risk of getting breast cancer over a lifetime, and individuals without the mutation had an 8.1% risk of developing breast cancer over a lifetime. King's discovery allowed women to get screened and become informed of their risk for developing breast cancer and ovarian cancer, and has also improved inexpensive screening tools. The picture on the right is actually King and the members of her research lab that found the breast cancer gene. During our research, we have found many course correlations that related to what we have been reading in our textbook. The first connection we saw was about secondary prevention. In the textbook, we learned that secondary prevention aims to reduce the impact of disease or injury in the earliest stages of occurrence. We believe that King's findings of BRCA1 and BRCA2 is a prime example of secondary prevention because knowing what gene is related to cancer allows people to be on the lookout and try to catch the disease early. A way people can be on the lookout is by going to screenings, which is secondary prevention. We also learned what screening was in the book, and it states the objective of screening is early detection of disease so that treatments can be implemented as early as possible.
Another course concept that related to King's work is the social determinants of health. We learned in the social determinants of health that health are non-medical factors that influence health outcomes, that they are conditions which people are born, grow, work, live, and age, and the wider sets of force of the systems shaping the conditions of daily life. We saw a correlation more specifically with the neighborhood and environment of King's work with the Abuelas de Plazo de Maya. The kidnapped kids were unable to get the health they need to due to the environment. Because of their environment, they weren't able to get quality health care. And one of the biggest factor that led to their kidnapping is because of their environment and neighborhood.
Next, we will discuss our own final thoughts and reflections on our research. I had a lot of fun researching King. She has contributed a lot to public health, and I was intrigued in her work for Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo because it's not a usual contribution to public health. I also found King's life prior to her amazing finding truly interesting and inspiring. It seems like King was a normal college student, and I felt very seen when reading about how she had thoughts about dropping out of college. Although the quote that Alan mentioned, and I am not in a graduate school, I interpreted his quote with the idea if everyone dropped out of college when it got hard, then there would have no one been graduated. Lastly, I found it inspiring to learn that King was able to save so many lives due to enabling early detection. I have a family member who has breast cancer, who is a breast cancer survivor, and who actually detected it early twice. So it was really heartwarming to learn about the history of cancer prevention.
I find it truly inspiring that she revolutionized the cancer prevention and treatment with her research. King also inspired me into not giving up since she was initially rejected from the assistant professorship, and she was still held her head up high to be able to get in. And this was very empowering to see her prove all people wrong who doubted a woman into a leadership role. I also find it interesting how she was able to find her fascinations in statistics and applying them to genetics, and how it took her until graduate school to find what she was truly interested in. I relate to that as well because I am figuring out what I want to do with my life and career and education wise.
And here are resources, and thank you for listening.